So today we're going to talk about a literary movement that's, well, it's so much more than just words on a page. Think of it as a full-blown revolution, one born right from the margins. And its goal? It wasn't just to tell new stories, but to actually, fundamentally, change society. We're diving into the powerful world of Dalit literature.
Let's just start with this. This poem by Sharan Kumar Limbale, wow. In just a handful of lines, he absolutely nails a feeling that is right at the core of this whole movement. It's that deep, painful feeling of being excluded, right? Of being left standing outside while literally everyone else gets to go in. That feeling? That's the raw material. That's what Dalit literature is built from.
And that really brings us to the central question here. I mean, think about it. For centuries, an entire community's reality was just gone, wiped from the national story. So what happens? What happens when you're not just kept out of the temple, but you're literally written out of the story of your own country? Well, Dalit literature, that is the answer to that question.
So to really get this literature, you have to understand where it comes from. And it comes from a voice that was, for a long, long time, kept separate. We're talking physically and socially segregated, a voice that came from, quite literally, outside the boundary of the village. You see, for what felt like forever, mainstream literature basically had two ways of dealing with Dalits. Option one, just pretend they don't exist, complete erasure. Option two was something critics call a discourse of pity, and this is where Dalits might show up in stories, but only as these helpless victims. You know, they were objects you were supposed to feel sorry for, but they were never ever the heroes of their own stories. They were never shown with their own pride, their own agency.
So you gotta ask, what changed, right? How did this community finally find its voice? Well, the spark for this whole literary revolution, you can trace it back to the life and work of one absolutely towering figure.
Okay, and this is so important to understand. The word Dalit itself. The writer Arjun Dangal explains it perfectly. He says it's not just a caste, it's a realization. It's this moment of awakening, a political and social consciousness that says we see the centuries of oppression and we are committed to fighting back. That shift in thinking, right there, that's the philosophical engine driving this entire movement.
And the person who sparked that awakening? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And his actions, they were nothing short of radical. This wasn't a man who just wrote. He acted. He published journals for people who had no voice. He led the public burning of the Manusmriti. He walked into temples where he was banned. And in the end, he led this massive conversion to Buddhism, completely rejecting the caste structure. Every single one of those acts planted a seed. It gave an entire community a newfound self-respect. And, you could say, the permission to build a literary movement.
So all of this awakening, it naturally led to a totally new kind of writing. Because look, this new literature wasn't about telling slightly different stories. No way. It had a fundamentally different purpose. It basically took the traditional idea of what art is supposed to be and threw it right out the window.
And this just lays out the difference so clearly. On one hand, you have mainstream literature. Its job, entertainment, right? Aesthetic pleasure. It uses proper, cultured language. But Dalit literature, it's the complete opposite. Its purpose isn't entertainment, it's social transformation. Its content isn't some middle-class drama, it's the raw, unfiltered, real experience of oppression. And the language? It's deliberately the spoken language of the people, what some might call uncouth or impolite. And that itself is a huge rejection of the polished grammar of the elite.
So, if you want to boil it down, this literature is really defined by a few key ideas. First, it's born from a collective pain, not just one person's angst. It's fueled by revolt, by a complete rejection of the way things are. It is proudly, openly political, drawing huge inspiration from Ambedkar. And maybe most importantly, it's written by people who see themselves as activist artists. Their words aren't just words, they're tools for a movement. Okay, and this leads to maybe the most radical idea of them all. Think about it. If you have a new kind of literature with a totally new purpose, can you even judge it by the old rules? Well, Dalit writers said, absolutely not. They argued that their work needed a whole new way of thinking about what makes art good, or true, or beautiful.
All right, let's really get into this because it's fascinating stuff. So traditional Hindu aesthetics are often built on these three big ideas. Satyam, which is the true, Shivam, the sacred, and Sundaram, the beautiful. Now, what Dalit writers did was they took this whole framework and just flipped it on its head. They started asking questions like, what is true about a religious text that says an entire group of people were born from someone's feet? They said that's not Satyam, that's Asatyam. It's untruth. It's a story made up to oppress us. And sacred? What's sacred about a system that calls us polluting? No, the system itself is unholy. And as for beautiful, What's beautiful about a life of forced misery? They made a point to write about the unbeauty of their reality.
So if you tear down the old foundation, what do you build in its place? Well, Sharan Kumar Limbale offered this incredibly powerful, life-affirming new foundation. He said the new Sundaram, the new beautiful, is simply the humanity of human beings. The new truth is equality. And the new sacred act, it's the struggle for liberation itself. That's the new aesthetic.
But, the conversation didn't just stop there. Like any really powerful movement, it started to look inward. It started to critique itself. And it began asking a really tough but really important question. Okay, in our own fight against being erased, who are we still leaving out?
And this is where Dalit feminist scholars stepped in and made such a crucial point. They basically said, look, there are two problems happening here. On one side, the Dalit movement often talks about caste as if gender doesn't matter, ignoring the unique struggles of Dalit women. And on the other side, mainstream feminism often talks about gender as if caste doesn't matter, ignoring how deeply caste shapes a woman's life. So Dalit women were caught right in the middle, their very specific reality basically erased by both movements.
And this dialogue from Shantabai Danaji Dani's autobiography, it just brings that whole reality to life with such heartbreaking clarity. You can hear the simple, devastating logic of a child just trying to make sense of a world that makes no sense at all. People can touch cats and dogs, so why not us? And the answer she gets, do not ask so many questions. That right there, that is the sound of an oppression so deep and so ingrained that it can't even justify itself.
So where does all this leave us today? Well, as the movement has grown and matured, its own definition of itself has expanded. It's become this incredibly powerful way to think about and understand all marginalized voices. You could say it's an unfinished revolution, and it's still growing. The writer Babu Rao Bagal really summed it up well. He argued that the idea of Dalitness has evolved into something much, much bigger. It's not just about one specific community anymore. Now it stands for the shared history of struggle for all oppressed people. We're talking tribal people, the working classes, women. It's become this big tent idea for anyone fighting back from the margins.
And that really brings us full circle, back to a final, provocative question. If a literature's main goal, its whole reason for being, is social revolution, and not just entertainment or traditional beauty, then can we, or even should we, judge it by the same old rules we use for other art? It's a question that challenges you to rethink everything, not just a literary tradition, but the very purpose of art itself.